Hey guys, and welcome to another one of my flight attendant videos. In case you're new to my channel, my name is Marina. I'm a flight attendant, and because I have gotten so many questions about flight attendant or aviation terminology lately, I thought about making this video. I hope that this video will make all of the flight attendant terms and aviation terminology way more clear to you. So let's start. I came up with 20 terms and I'll do my best to explain them to you. If you have any further questions, let me know in the comments below and I'll try to answer those questions about flight attendant terminology, like other terms that I don't explain in this video, or anything else that you want to know in the comment section below. So let's get started. So the first term is something that I get asked so many questions about. The term is red eye. What is a red eye? A red eye is basically a flight that starts either late at night or lasts the whole night. So for instance, if I go to Hong Kong, we'll depart at 11 p.m. and we will be flying for 12 hours straight, which means it's a red eye flight because we're flying the whole night. In case you're wondering why it's called a red eye, well, if you don't get enough sleep, your eyes usually end up a little red. So yeah, that can actually happen after a red eye flight. So don't forget to use your eye drops, like hydrating eye drops, and you should be fine to keep your eyes pearly white. But anyways, that's a red eye flight. The next term is purser. What is a purser? I keep talking about pursers on long haul flights, pursers on short haul flights. So the thing is, it's basically flying lead. If you've heard of flying lead, it's the one who's in charge of the cabin, but a purser is a little more than flying lead. So a purser is really in charge of the cabin. A purser makes all of the decisions in terms of like service and stuff. And in case of anomalies on a flight, like for instance, you've got a delay or you've got an unruly passenger or something, the purser is the one who makes the decision together with the captain or the pilots. The purser has to have several years of experience as a flight attendant, and they actually have to apply for a promotion pretty much. They receive special training for it, and depending on the airline, you will either have pursers or you won't have pursers. So I think on international flights you usually always have pursers, and my airline also has pursers on short haul flights. So you'll always have a purser and flight attendants in the cabin. So the next term is reserve. What is reserve? I keep talking about like reserve and stuff, you know? So an airline has reserves in case a flight gets canceled or someone times out because they have too many flying hours, or someone gets sick and they need someone to step in. So that's a reserve basically, because you can't just say, oh, we're gonna fly that A320 trip with like 2 flight attendants instead of 4. That just, it doesn't work like that. There are laws about the minimum crew complement, and you always have to have a certain number of flight attendants within a plane, depending on how many passengers a plane fits and all of that. So for my airline, it means that they'll have to call you at least 12 hours before flight if they want to use you on a flight. And we can actually bid on those reserve lines, and bidding is the next term. So we bid on our trips or on our reserve or standby lines. Basically, if you're on straight reserve, it means that you're on reserve for a while. You don't have trips scheduled. You just get trips when other people get sick or something and they need another flight attendant to step in for them. So we can bid on those reserve lines, or I'm actually a line holder. I'll explain that in a minute, what that means. I can actually bid on different trips, and bidding pretty much means requesting a flight, and it depends on your seniority whether you get a flight or whether you don't get a flight. So you can basically just say, oh, I want to get this flight, and if that flight doesn't work out, I want this flight. And it's basically how I make my schedule. You can also buddy bid, which means you're bidding together with another person and you're basically just flying with a friend or a buddy. My airline actually distinguishes between reserve and standby. So I just explained what reserve means, and standby actually means that you have a 1 hour call out time. Now this can be different for every single airline. That's how it works for my airline. If I'm on standby, they'll call me an hour before my flight. My airline also has airport standby. It's also called ready reserve for some airlines. Airport standby or ready reserve means that you are actually spending your time at the airport and you're there if there is a last minute crew change or something and they need someone or a whole crew at the last minute. So basically you and your short haul crew for my airline will spend your time at the airport just waiting around for a certain amount of hours if they call you. So you have to be at the airport. The next flight attendant term is line, or actually a line holder. So what it means is basically, I just explained reserve and standby, and if you have a line, they're not gonna like call you and tell you, oh, we need you tomorrow for that trip, but you'll have your trip scheduled beforehand and you know where you're going, you know when your days off are and all of that. So basically you have a preset schedule that you probably bid on. So I'm a line holder, but I do have standby or reserve now and then. So usually I'm on reserve or standby about 3 or 4 times a year for 1 or 2 weeks, so it's not too bad. But usually I have my line, and it's really cool because you can actually schedule so much more stuff beforehand because you actually know where you're going, when you're gonna go there. You can plan ahead, like what you want to do on the layover and all of that. The next term is deadhead. Oh my gosh, I got so many questions about what a deadhead is, how deadheading works. So basically, your airline sends you to another place as a deadhead, which means you're going there as a passenger and you're sitting in a passenger seat and everything. You're not working that flight as a flight attendant on duty, but they need you to work a different flight from a different base. So they're basically just shuttling you to another base, and then you work the flight out of that base. So that's deadheading. I also keep mentioning on short haul trips that I'm a chaser. What a chaser is it's the additional flight attendant position. So we've got a standard crew. Usually that's 3 people. So it's 1 purser and 2 flight attendants, because on our A319, that's our smallest Airbus plane for short haul flights that we have stationed at my base, we actually only need 3 people within the cabin. But then you might actually change to a bigger aircraft, and then you need a 4th person. So for our Airbus 320s and 321s, we actually need a 4th person. Sometimes if we're going to like Moscow or something that's at least 2.5 or 3 hours long, like the flight time, then we actually get a 5th person. So we have like 2 chasers on those trips. Technically it's just an extra position, so this person is never going to be on an Airbus 319. A chaser can't be on that plane because that's just standard crew for my airline. And then you'll just fly the A320 and the A321 for my airline if you are a chaser. So your trip is going to be different from everyone else's trip. With trip, I mean like the pairing. The pairing pretty much means how your schedule works on that trip. So for instance, if I'm going from Munich to Berlin, back to Munich, and then I'm going to, let's say, Gothenburg, and then I have a layover in Gothenburg, that's the pairing for that day. And maybe my crew is going from Munich to Berlin, they have a layover there, and then I get another crew in Berlin and they go back to Munich, and then I might get another crew in Munich that goes to Gothenburg together with me. So that pretty much means my schedule on a trip. That's the pairing. On short haul trips, I also keep talking about legs. So what is a leg? A leg is basically one flight. So on short haul trips, you usually have several legs. So I'd be going, let's say, from Munich to Berlin. That's one leg because it's one flight. And then when I'm going back to Munich, that's another leg. Going to Gothenburg would be the 3rd leg. So it's a trip with 3 legs on the first day, pretty much. And I keep talking about long haul and short haul. Long haul basically means that you're flying on a bigger, like long distance aircraft, which for my airline would be an A330, A340, A350, and an A380 at my base. If you're flying Boeing, it would be like the 777, the 747, and all of those airplanes. I mean, they can fly short range, I guess, but for my airline, they usually only fly long haul. So long haul basically means a flight time of more than 5 hours for my airline. Short haul would mean every flight that's shorter, and on short haul trips you usually have more than 1 flight per day. Because I'm just talking about short haul trips, I can actually continue with turn or turnaround. So if I say I'm flying a turn, it would probably be like flying from Munich to Berlin and right back to Munich. Basically what it means is that you don't have a layover at a destination, but you're going right back. So that's a turn or turnaround. I keep calling them turnarounds too. Like both terms are used for the same thing, basically. The next aviation term goes together with like how we get paid. I have probably mentioned block time once or twice before. So block time is what we get paid for. We don't get paid for when we sit at airport or when we are actually inside of the plane and boarding the aircraft. We get paid from the minute that the blocks, which is basically the brake, are taken away to the minute where the blocks are set in place again. So block time basically means on blocks is where you're not getting paid for anything because you're there at the gate, and off blocks actually means the time that you're getting paid for it. So from the minute of pushback, which means the plane is actually pushed back so that it can start taxiing, that's when you start getting paid as a flight attendant. And also I keep getting asked where we actually sit on an aircraft. You've probably always seen those seats that kind of have, like, you can pull them down and stuff. Those are jump seats, and yes, we actually sit on those. And I know for some airlines and in some countries you need a license for them. If I'm working, I have to have a license for it, but I can also jump seat on a plane that has extra jump seats and sit on a jump seat if they don't have any open seats on a plane. For my airline, that's possible, but yeah, jump seat is the seat where flight attendants actually sit, and it doesn't just have a regular seatbelt, but it has kind of like a harness. So you've got a seatbelt like in the bottom, like a regular seatbelt, and then you've got like those two straps as well. So it's very safe and everything. Also in case of turbulence, because you don't have a regular seat, there's usually not that much space, you know. I also keep talking about going to my briefing. So my briefing time is basically my reporting time. So that's the time I need to sign in at our flight operations center. I don't have to go to the airport from my airline. This depends on your airline. You might have a crew room where you meet your crew, or you meet them at the plane, depending on your airline and the destination. But for my airline, if I'm at my home base, I'm actually going to our flight operations center, which is a couple of miles outside of the airport, and then the crew meets up there. We talk about service, about all of the special things on a flight, and we talk about emergency questions. Like the pursers usually just ask us a couple of questions so that they know that we're familiar with all of our emergency procedures and stuff like that. That is my briefing or briefing time or reporting time. Oh, and by the way, for short haul trips, the briefing time is 1 hour and 20 minutes before the scheduled departure time, and for long haul flights it's 1 hour and 14 minutes before the scheduled departure time, which means that's time that we don't get paid for basically. I also keep mentioning my pickup time. So pickup time is basically the shuttle time or van time. That's the time at which I need to be downstairs in the lobby of a hotel where our driver, like the van or bus driver, is picking us up and taking us to the airport. So that's a set time that my airline gives me. So I can't just say, oh, I want to go to the airport early. It's not possible, at least not for my airline, because it's not a hotel shuttle. It's just like a crew bus usually. So that's the time where your basically cab driver picks you up at the hotel. I also get asked a lot of questions about flying standby. So I told you I can be a standby, like for my airline, but I can also fly standby. Flying standby basically means that you don't buy a regular ticket, you buy a ticket at a reduced price. So basically it's using your benefits, and you only get onto that plane if there is an open seat. If they don't have an open seat, then you can jump seat, or otherwise you're just not able to get onto that flight. I know a lot of people call it non-rev, which means non-revenue passengers, because they don't really pay anything for the flight. They just pay like airport taxes and stuff. But I don't really want to call it that, because for my airline, it doesn't work that way. I think generally speaking in Europe, it doesn't really work that way. So you still pay a set amount or a percentage of a ticket price. So for me, it's not free like it is in the US, for instance. Just saying. So that's why I call it flying standby and not non-revving. I also keep mentioning my off days. Off days are my guaranteed days off each month. So basically each month I have 4 days that are scheduled in advance where I'm off. So they can't really give me a trip for those days. So those are in my plan, and they can't change my schedule and tell me you're flying a trip on that day. It doesn't really work that way. So those are my guaranteed days off each month, and they have to be 4 consecutive days off for my airline. I also get asked questions about my transit time or my sit. Transit time and sit is the same thing. You are at an airport and you have to wait on the ground before your next flight. So for instance, if I'm doing a Berlin turn, usually it's like 45 to 50 minutes where I'm waiting, where the plane gets cleaned, all that. And sometimes we change aircraft and we have like 2 or 3 hours in between 2 flights, and that means we have like a 2-hour sit, which means we're basically just sitting there at the airport or at our flight operations center waiting for our next flight, and we're not getting paid for that time. So that's the transit time or the sit. So the time in between 2 flights that we do on one day. And I have one last flight attendant or aviation term for you, and that is per diem. The per diem is my allowance for a trip. Because my airline pays for my hotel, but they don't pay for breakfast or dinner on all of the food that I need. They do pay for the transportation to the hotel, but everything else that I need, I have to pay for with my per diem. It's an allowance that I get, and for my airline, it's a set amount that we get for short haul trips and a set amount that we get for long haul trips. So for instance, for a long haul trip, if I'm gone 24 hours, I'll get 48 euros, which is about like 50 something dollars. And if I'm doing a short haul trip, I'll get 42 euros, which is about $45 for 24 hours of being away. So those were my 20 flight attendant or aviation terms. I hope this really helped you guys, because I know I've been getting so many questions and I try to answer all of them, but I feel like it's easier to make a video about it and explain it in detail. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel and you're not subscribed yet, go ahead, subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any videos videos and make sure that that bell thingy, like the notification bell, is switched on, because otherwise you're not gonna get notified when new videos are out. So I'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much for watching.